look up the word corruption, it's defined as dishonest or fraudulent conduct by those in power. The Workers' Compensation Board of Alberta can be viewed as those in power over injured workers. Bullying is defined as seek to harm, intimidate, or coerce someone perceived as vulnerable. WCB constantly tells injured workers if they don't do exactly what they say, when they say it, they will be cut off. Even when they are telling the injured workers what they're telling the injured workers is against policy, against medical advice, or outside of their restrictions and limitations. That's all three of the definitions. WCB is corrupted and bullies injured workers and has done so for many years and will continue to do so until something is done. I'm here today to disclose what really happens at WCB with thousands of injured workers for over 50 years due to this dishonest and fraudulent conduct. I am one of thousands of WCB claimants who has sustained serious injuries at work. Pardon me. Injuries at work and was and still am subjected to WCB's corruptions and bullying. Over the past 5 3/4 years, I have read or listened to hundreds of stories from injured workers that have also been subjected to this corruption and bullying. Other than their injuries, they have all have the same stories about how they're treated with WCB. And WCB's refusal to adhere to their own policies, schedules, guides, code of conduct, principles, and the Workers' Compensation Act. We are treated like criminals, like we're faking it. We're forced back to work because their medical consultants, their GPs, specialists, write reports giving their opinions, which in turn are relied upon by the case managers to either deny a claim or injuries, or report that we're able to work modified duties at our jobs, among many other issues. Injured workers with serious life-threatening injuries are forced back to work and sustain even further injuries, or worse, end up permanently disabled. And many of them are very young. These reports contain lies as well as provide false or misleading medical evidence. According to section 151.1(1)(a) of the WCB Act, it's illegal for anyone with an interest in a claim to provide false or misleading information to the board. WCB's investigation department won't enforce this, ever, even with documented proof of this.
Shame.
WCB does not listen to our family physicians, and they are overpowered most times by WCB medical consultants. There are so many physicians now that won't even see an injured worker due to this and having to deal with WCB. I just want to mention that I recently read that the Alberta Medical Association has requested reports from all physicians in Alberta about their experiences dealing with WCB. And this, I think, kind of proves that there's a problem. WCB policy states it's their responsibility to investigate all reported medical. They utilize their own doctors for this, leaving the injured workers without pertinent medical attention needed. They have the ability to expedite medical attention very early in a worker's claim, but refuse to do so, leaving thousands with untreated, undiagnosed, long-lasting health conditions or injuries. Their medical consultants are physicians that sit behind a desk and give opinion based on medical information on file. They never meet the injured worker. The medical evidence that comes from our own doctors and scans and specialists are ignored. They call the injured workers doctors and try to get them to change their opinion, their diagnosis, their restrictions, and get them cleared for work or for their work conditioning programs and medical documents tend to disappear. WCB allows employers not to adhere to policies with many different issues and situations. For example, WCB's physicians and therapists provide a list of temporary work restrictions when an injured worker is sent back to work. Back to work on modified duties and refuse to listen to our own doctors. Policy states our doctors are supposed to be involved in this, which is not true. The employer will ignore these restrictions, putting the injured worker's health and safety at risk. And when WCB is told this, they refuse to do anything. When an injured worker shows any form of disagreement or tries to argue about this, due to their family doctors stating that they can't do that type of work, we're seen as having to refuse our modified duties and told by WCB that we're not cooperating. Many workers are then cut off benefits due to this reason. Their policy states any WCB program that WCB places us in is supposed to be approved by our family doctors. WCB does not follow their own doctor's medical opinions. Injured workers are also made to accept what they, WCB, determine as suitable employment, even though the job isn't within permanent restrictions and puts our health and safety at risk. Many workers aren't aware of this corruption, adhere to this, ending up re-injuring themselves or do not find work in the field that WCB says they can. Thousands of injured workers end up on welfare, lose their homes, are unable to provide for their families, and the list just goes on. WCB's refusal to adhere to policy forces us to appeal almost all decisions. Almost all decisions they make due to this refusal to adhere to their own policies. This process is extremely intimidating for many, not to mention difficult to write up the reports and presenting them at all levels of appeal. WCB's first level of appeal, after the case manager makes a decision, is with the decision review body. The resolution specialists are WCB employees. A very high percentage of these appeals are denied at this level, forcing the injured workers to file with the Appeals Commission. This process is even more intimidating and requires a great deal of knowledge, and is very strict on the wording. Many injured workers don't have this ability. For example, there are lots of older truck drivers that don't even have a grade 12 education or have even touched a computer because they started working at a very young age. WCB relies on this. And they rely on the workers not knowing how to navigate the system. So they will deny everything. Thousands of workers aren't even aware of the corruption until it's too late to do anything, like appealing a decision. WCB has an appeals advisory office that's supposed to help the injured workers with the appeal process. These advisors are also either corrupt or incompetent in that they manipulate the wording on these requests for review or a decision, so we lose at all levels of appeal. Most private consultants out there are former WCB employees and charge unrealistic amounts to complete these appeals, which even include a percentage of all monies a worker receives, both retroactively and future monies. There is no education, training, or licensing required to be an advocate or a consultant. Absolutely anybody can be an advocate or consultant. Hundreds of thousands of dollars of the employer's funds are spent on this corruption. I personally don't believe a high percentage of employers are even aware of this. For example, WCB's medical consultants charge $75 to $150 for each report and memo that workers' comp has them write up. And this happens multiple times. Every time WCB doesn't like a report from an injured worker's doctors, they get a medical consultant to look at it and give their opinion. So if you multiply this by all the injured workers, then you're talking hundreds of millions of dollars of the employer's money. These reports are also completed to deny injuries, services needed, medical care, etc. Which if they listen to our own doctors, there wouldn't be a need to spend this much, let alone have medical consultants. If you had a chance to listen to my fellow injured worker Rob's video, he mentioned that there are approximately 45,000 workers injured on the job every year. So it's pretty easy to do the math on how many millions are spent on these medical consultants alone. They also send us injured workers to have examinations and assessments completed by their own EPs and specialists due to refusing to listen to our own. These reports are fabricated and often have dates altered on them when it could benefit the worker's claim. They lie about assessments completed or information that did not even happen. For example, a report for a worker's range of motion that wasn't completed. We're not allowed to have a witness in with us for these examinations, which I'm assuming is for these reasons. Their specialists are also paid hundreds of dollars for these examinations and reports. Multiply those by just 1,000 injured workers, and again, it's millions of dollars wasted. Thousands of claimants end up with PTSD and among other psychological injuries due to the trauma of the work accident, as well as their interactions with WCB. WCB's psychiatrists are paid on average $7,500 for each assessment they do. Thousands of these reports are fabricated and contain false information about the injured worker. Every injured worker is entitled to a copy of what's called a cost run report and can see how much money is spent on everything, including their own doctors. WCB hires an investigation company which follow and record the injured workers around. Follows workers around and pays thousands of dollars to have this completed. This in itself causes an injured worker severe stress and anxiety, and it's not because of them faking the injury. This is a huge breach of privacy. I was followed around for 5 days and again for 4 days within the first 4 months of my claim. And WCB paid that investigation $7,000. Thousands of workers have been followed and investigated, which also cost millions of dollars. WCB implemented a special investigations unit with officers appointed under the WCB Act solely to investigate and or charge workers with false claims or misleading information they provide. According to policy and legislation, this is supposed to be applied to anyone that does this, including doctors, therapists, specialists, employers, basically anybody with a direct interest of a claim. There have been several reviews into the WCB over the years. These all focus on WCB policy. I stand here today and assure you there is nothing wrong with 90% of that policy. As you all know, Lisa Notley, the NDP and the NDP ordered the review to be completed back in 2016-2017. One good thing that came out of this was the implementation of the Fairness Review Committee. This was independent from the WCB. Hundreds of claims were able to have decisions overturned and received what was owed to them. Unfortunately, Kenny came along and axed that committee and allowed it to be run by the WCB, which was no different than at the Appeals Advisory Office. The Fairness Review is biased with all claimants' issues. Another change that came with this is our inability to file a complaint with the Alberta Ombudsman, which was an option after losing an appeal at the Appeals Commission, or the problems injured workers have with their WCB's corruption. We are now forced to utilize this corrupt Fairness Review Board before we're allowed to file with the Ombudsman. Rachel Notley's Review Committee report that was completed after this review did not mention anything about the 20 injured workers presented, or anything about what the 20 injured workers presented about WCB's corruption, bullying, or refusal to adhere to policies. These were all completely dismissed. However, the employer's claims about what they felt needed reviewing was definitely taken into account, especially the workers' conduct, which in turn resulted in policy changes. The NDP implemented the interim relief benefits program so claimants can still have somewhat of an income. This is based on minimum wage and minimum wage only. With today's economy, there is no way a family of four could survive on this. These interim relief benefits require an injured worker to submit an application for this that is processed through the DRB or the Appeals Commission. This is a very lengthy process and can take a few months, again leaving the injured worker with no money to live. The legislation, along with their own policy schedules and guides, as well as their code of conduct and principles, are not adhered to by some 1,800 employees at WCB. The Workers' Compensation Board of Alberta is a public agency legislated by the WCA 2000. The legislation was developed to protect stakeholders, also known as employers, and not the injured workers, even though it's believed to. I am one of several hundred, if not thousands, of injured workers that have documented proof of this corruption that happened with WCB and its hierarchy of case managers, supervisors, managers, directors, the CEO, their doctors, therapists, psychiatrists, and specialists, etc. This corruption is getting worse every year because nobody will stop it. The labor ministers over the years have received many letters about this and refused to look into these problems that put the injured workers' health and safety at risk. When they do look into it, WCB lies about the situation and the ministers believe them. My fellow injured worker, Rob, and myself had a meeting with Minister Jones, the Minister of Labor, yesterday. And we brought him 40-plus letters from injured workers detailing the corruptions they have been forced to deal with while on their claim. Hopefully, Minister Jones will actually do something about it. One of the letters given to the Minister Jones was mine. I gave him a list of 9 instances dealing with the corruptions I experienced, all the way up to Trevor Alexander, the president and CEO of WCB. And that was just a small sample of the corruptions I have personally experienced on my claim. I let him know that I have the emails between myself and WCB, and I have photos of altered documents, both before and after they were altered. Minister Jones seemed shocked and asked me to send him the emails and photos. One example was Trevor Alexander. I emailed Trevor complaining about an issue I was having with the director, Peter Lambouille. Trevor gave my complaint to Peter to look into. That's a major conflict of interest. Another example was when Peter contacted me telling me that Trevor asked him to look into it, I went to the Fairness Review Board. All they said was, Trevor doesn't deal with these things and has to give it to a director to look into and deal with. And that they didn't see any issue with Trevor giving the complaint about Peter to Peter to deal with. One I forgot to put on my list was the DRB refusing to allow me to participate in a request for review that I filed. I have the right to participate, to present evidence, and to explain my reasoning for appealing. That was taken away from me. And when I brought this to the manager, they said it was fine. When I brought it to the director, all he said was the review specialist reconsidered her decision and everything was fine. When I brought it to the fairness review, they too said everything was fine. I was never allowed to participate in that appeal whatsoever. And the wording of my RFR was also changed so that I would lose at the appeals commission. The Alberta government has allowed this to continue for over 50 years. I can't even fathom what the injured workers went through before legislation and policy were made available to the public. But I've heard many horror stories. Pardon me. When a political party takes an interest, all they do is call a review of WCB's policies. They outright refuse to listen to the injured workers. This system is designed and operated to protect the employers. WCB states in their principles that decision-making is based on evidence, law, policy, and fair, impartial, and transparent process. The Code of Conduct states WCB is committed to being honest, that's a lot, and courteous in all of our interactions. States we have the right to dignity and respect. There are tens of thousands of injured workers that will tell you different. The information I have talked about today is just a fraction of the problems and issues injured workers are subjected to by the Workers' Compensation Board. Injured workers have a very high separation and divorce rate. They lose their homes, leaving them homeless, among other effects of this corruption and bullying. Some have even resorted to suicide. In the past 2 months, I know of 3 injured workers that have talked about applying for MAID, medical assisted death, due to their interactions with WCB and the need for proper medical treatment due to the extreme pain levels. In 2017, an injured worker set himself on fire in front of the WCB office in Edmonton. There have been injured workers commit suicide because of what they have to go through with WCB's corruption and bullying. Hundreds of injured workers choose to walk away, to suck up the pain and injuries and go back to work, with a high number ending up re-injuring themselves or even worse, permanently disabled. The corruption and bullying needs to stop. Injured workers need to get the proper medical attention for their injuries so they can get on with their life. They need to be treated with respect and dignity. They didn't wake up one day choosing to have a serious work accident. If WCB actually adhered to their own policies, there wouldn't be a need to employ half of what they do now. WCB claims they need to protect the stakeholders. Or protect the stakeholders' money, sorry. Are they really protecting it when they're spending millions of dollars on this corruption? I can go on for hours just detailing the corruption I've personally experienced with my claim. And can go on for days talking about the corruption of other injured workers have shared with me. Us injured workers demand change. We're not asking for change. Been there, done that, bought the t-shirt. It didn't work. So now we're demanding it. Here, here.